He barely brushed the handlebar. But that biker saw weakness and struck. 30 minutes later, the man he slapped was being saluted by a full Black Hawk unit. And the town? Dead silent. Frank Delaney didn't stand out. At least not anymore. Most folks passed him by without a second look. Just an old man with scuffed boots, a crooked gait, and a tattered olive-green army jacket that hadn't seen combat in over 4 decades. But Frank wore it every Thursday like clockwork, walking the same route to the corner deli on Main Street, where he'd pick up a loaf of rye, a roll of cough drops, and a single postcard addressed to a cadet at West Point. His grandson. He didn't need much. A bench by the window, a hot cup of coffee, time to himself. At 84, his legs weren't what they used to be. His left knee popped with every step, and his cane wasn't just for show. But he moved with the slow steadiness of a man who had lived through worse. That morning, the air had a sharp bite to it, one of those spring mornings that hadn't made up its mind between winter and warmth. Frank wore layers, his jacket patched at the sleeves, a plaid shirt beneath, tucked into jeans too stiff to be comfortable. On his chest, the faint outline of a name tag, long since worn smooth. W.F. Delaney. He stepped out of the deli, paper bag tucked under one arm, the other gripping his cane. Across the street, the sound of revving engines tore through the morning calm. A group of bikers had gathered outside Murphy's Taproom, engines idling like a low growl. Frank didn't pay them any mind. He'd seen enough noise in his day to know real danger didn't always come with a warning. He shuffled past the row of polished chrome and custom leather, careful not to touch, but the sidewalk was narrow, and the end of his jacket, thicker than he remembered, brushed the handlebar of a matte chopper. The bike didn't tip. It didn't even rock. Still, Frank stopped immediately, turned, and raised a hand. "Sorry, son. Didn't mean to bump it. Coat's heavier than I thought." His voice was steady, polite, almost apologetic. He smiled. The biker didn't. Duke Wallace was taller than most, built like a brick wall with sunglasses that mirrored everything but reflected nothing. He didn't ask what happened, didn't look at the bike. He just stepped forward and slapped Frank across the face. The sound cracked through the street like a firecracker. Frank's knees buckled. He dropped to the pavement, one hand catching the fall, the other still gripping the torn paper bag. The rye loaf rolled into the gutter. No one moved. A woman sipping coffee at the cafe turned her head. A man on his phone glanced over, then looked away. A teenager on a skateboard rolled by without a word. Frank didn't cry out. He sat up slowly, blood trickling from the corner of his lip. His face flushed. Not from pain, but from humiliation. He picked up the dusty loaf and tucked it back into the torn bag. Then he reached for his cane, which had rolled a few feet away, and with a groan stood. Slow and careful, like everything might break if he moved too fast. He made his way to the bench outside the bus stop and sat. His breathing was uneven, his pride worse. He'd pulled men out of burning Humvees once. Now he couldn't even get someone to hand him a paper towel. He glanced at the people passing by. Blank stares, shrugged shoulders. Not even pity, just absence. The kind of quiet that screamed louder than words. Inside the bar, Duke laughed, dragging out the story for his friends like a rerun of a bad TV show. "Dude looked like a bag of bones tripping over himself. Shoulda known better than to touch my ride." Frank sat upright, adjusted his collar, wiped the blood from his lip with the inside of his sleeve. Then, slowly, he pulled out his phone. An old flip model, cracked screen, faded buttons. He scrolled through one contact, just one. Eagle 6, emergency only. He tapped the button. One press. Then closed the phone, set it in his lap, and leaned back. No one noticed? Not yet. The thing about pain, real pain, is that it doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sits with you. Quiet. Heavy. Franklin Delaney sat still on the bench, eyes half closed, letting the sting of the slap simmer into something deeper. His jaw ached, and the metallic taste of blood clung to his tongue. But what cut sharper than the blow was the silence that followed. Not one soul had said a word. Across the street, Duke Wallace lit a cigarette and exhaled like he owned the air. His friends were halfway through their beers. The bartender stepped outside, glanced at Frank, then turned away, like he was furniture, forgotten. Frank reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a faded white handkerchief, pressing it to his lip. It came away streaked with red. His fingers trembled, not from age, but from the sheer weight of being seen and discarded. A woman in yoga pants walked by, earbuds in. Frank lifted a hand slightly, maybe to ask for help, maybe just to prove he still existed. She didn't even look his way. Then came the next cut, cruel in a different shade. A young couple exited the cafe. The woman saw Frank, wrinkled her nose, and muttered, "God, can't they just stay off the street?" Her boyfriend laughed. She tossed a nickel at Frank's feet like it was an act of mercy. Frank didn't flinch. He picked up the coin, turned it over in his fingers, then dropped it gently into the torn paper bag beside the soiled rye bread. Inside Murphy's taproom, Duke raised his beer in mock salute. "To the old man who challenged horsepower with arthritis," he shouted. His crew roared. "Maybe next time he'll wear a helmet." One of them snapped a photo from the window. 30 seconds later, a post popped up in the town's private Facebook group. "Veteran my ass. Dude probably faked the limp for sympathy, LOL. Stay down, old man." The comments poured in. Laughing emojis, gifs of old men falling. "Should have stayed in the nursing home. I'd have run him over just for breathing near my bike. Time to retire your bones, Grandpa." No one deleted the post. No moderator stepped in. Frank didn't move. Black and white police cruiser rolled up, slow. 2 officers inside. The driver lowered his window, called out, "You okay there, sir?" Frank nodded once. "Fine," he said. The cop smirked. "Try not to trip again. These bikers get emotional." They laughed as they drove away. Frank's grip tightened on his cane. He had pulled men from burning wrecks, buried brothers, lost toes in jungles without names. He'd trained teenage boys to survive bullets, watched some of them not make it. But nothing had ever made him feel this hollow. He sat another minute, then 2, then 10, waiting. The breeze picked up, stirring his jacket. His hearing aid buzzed in his ear. A high-pitched whine. Not a siren. Not quite. Inside the bar, Duke was still going. "I should have decked him harder," he said. Hell, he looked like he was about to ask for a handout. A woman raised an eyebrow. "Wasn't he a vet?" Duke shrugged. "Sure, and I'm the goddamned president." The laughter didn't even feel real anymore. Frank stood, slow, deliberate. He walked 3 steps to the trash can, dropped the bloody handkerchief without looking, turned, sat back down, and opened his flip phone. 1 name, 1 number, Eagle 6, emergency only. He pressed the button, closed the phone, set it in his lap, and waited. 15 minutes passed. The pavement trembled. Subtle at first. A coffee mug on a patio table shook. A stroller rattled. A dog barked in a parked car. Then the sound came. Low. Deep. Pulsing. Someone stepped out of the bar. Squinted. What the hell? The air cracked. A shadow crossed Main Street. And then it hit. A blast of rotor wash that scattered dust and flyers into the air as a full-size Black Hawk helicopter descended into the lot behind the bar. Plates rattled, alarms chirped, every head turned. It didn't land at a base, not a drill site. It came down right here, in the middle of their small, sleepy town. As it touched down, the side doors slid open, and 12 soldiers in black tactical gear poured out in perfect formation. Simultaneously, a matte black SUV screeched to a halt outside Murphy's. Doors popped open. 6 more figures stepped out, moving with silent purpose. The bar's patrons flooded to the windows. Phones shot up. Gasps filled the air. None of the soldiers shouted. None raised a weapon. They didn't have to. They moved like judgment. From the Black Hawk, one man emerged. No helmet, just presence. Built like a wall. Mid-50s, silver streaking his temples. Jaw clenched with quiet fury. He walked past his men, past the crowd, past the stunned bartender who dropped his cigarette. He walked straight to Franklin. Frank looked up. The man didn't salute. He knelt. Placed one hand on Frank's shoulder, the other gently brushing the dried blood from his cheek. "I got here as fast as I could, Dad." Frank didn't speak. He didn't need to. Behind them, the town held its breath. Inside the bar, Duke's beer slipped from his hand. Foam spread across the counter. He turned slowly, saw the man's uniform, the patch, the name. U.S. Army Special Operations Commander Nathan Briggs. And that was the moment Duke Wallace realized. He hadn't just slapped some frail old man. He'd slapped the father of a ghost in the system. And ghosts? They don't come alone. They bring storms. Commander Nathan Briggs didn't speak to the crowd. He didn't need to. His uniform did all the talking. Silver oak leaves on his collar, black bars across his chest, a name tag that read Briggs, N. But it wasn't the medals or rank that made the town freeze. It was the way he looked at his father. No salute, no fanfare. Just stillness. Like a man standing at the grave of something bigger than himself. The bar fell silent. A beer bottle clinked against tile, rolled and hit the foot of a bar stool. Duke didn't move. Couldn't. His bravado melted with each step the commander took toward him. Nathan turned to the bikers. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Which one of you struck a decorated combat veteran outside a bar while your friends laughed?" No one answered. Then Duke cleared his throat. Tried to smile. "It was just a tap, man. He bumped my bike. Come on." Nathan took one step closer. That man pulled 2 soldiers from a burning Humvee in Fallujah. Carried one of them a mile under enemy fire, got shot in the leg, and didn't stop moving. He paused. "That man is my father." Duke's mouth opened, but the words didn't come. Nathan gestured. One of his men stepped back, lifted a radio to his shoulder. 2 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up. No sirens, no rush, but this time they didn't smirk. They didn't ask questions. They stepped out of the car with eyes locked on Duke. Nathan didn't turn to them. He just pointed. The officers nodded. They walked to Duke slowly. Pulled his arms behind his back. The cuffs clicked. Cold. Final. Someone in the bar whispered, "Oh my God." Someone else said, "That's his son?" But no one said a thing when Duke was walked out of the bar like a ghost, with no more stories to tell. Outside, the Black Hawk's rotors began to slow, their pulse no longer thunder but rhythm. The tactical team stood in silent formation, eyes forward, blocking traffic, blocking escape. Not with threats. With presence. Nathan returned to Frank, still seated, still watching the world with that quiet steel in his eyes. "You okay?" he asked, low. Frank nodded, almost imperceptibly. From across the street, a woman stepped forward. She held out a clean handkerchief. Her voice cracked. I should have said something. I'm sorry." Frank took it, nodded once. That was enough. Then it began. A boy in a baseball cap removed it and placed it over his heart. A father lifted his daughter and whispered something in her ear. A teenage skater rolled up, stopped, and stood tall. The crowd around Murphy's transformed. Phones lowered, heads bowed. No one clapped, no one cheered. They just stood. And then, slowly, the veterans stepped forward, one by one, from the gas station, from the sidewalk, from the diner across the street. They lined up shoulder to shoulder in front of the bar, standing at attention, eyes forward. A former Navy man with a cane. A retired Air Force pilot in a faded bomber jacket. A Marine with tattoos and trembling hands. They didn't need an order. They knew what to do. Nathan didn't stop them. He stepped back and let it happen. His men didn't move. They stood guard over the moment, over history correcting itself in real time. Frank sat straighter now, not because he wanted to, but because the weight had lifted. For the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. By evening, the video had already gone viral. No filters, no edits, just a clip of an old man being struck, and 30 minutes later a Black Hawk touching down on Main Street. Within hours, local news picked it up. By morning, it was on national broadcasts. They didn't just report the assault. They told the story. Sergeant Franklin Delaney, U.S. Army, Vietnam, Gulf War, Kosovo. 3 Bronze Stars, 1 Purple Heart, and until yesterday, completely invisible. The mayor called Nathan personally, asked if the city could host a public event in his father's honor. Nathan said, if it's for him, and not for press, he'll show up. And he did. The town green transformed. Folding chairs, a school choir, a Marine Corps bugler flown in from 3 states over. Frank didn't walk to the stage. He was wheeled by a young man he once taught algebra to, now grown, now crying. The crowd stood, not out of obligation, but because something in their spine said they had to. The mayor spoke, the governor sent a letter, but no one remembered their words. What they remembered was Nathan, standing tall at the mic. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't strike back. He didn't need to. His life speaks louder than fists ever could. Then he turned, faced the man in the wheelchair. Dad, you taught me what strength looks like. And now, finally, the world knows it too. Frank didn't speak. He didn't have to. He just raised one hand, firm, slow, deliberate. And the ovation that followed? It lasted nearly 4 minutes. Not for revenge. Not for drama. But for every quiet act of service no one clapped for. Until now. As the crowd settled into silence, Duke, still in cuffs, turned toward Nathan. You think just 'cause your daddy's some washed-up war hero I should kiss your boots? Nathan didn't move, didn't blink. He just looked at Duke with a calm so sharp it cut air. No, he said, voice low, steel in every syllable. I don't want you to kiss my boots. I want you to understand something very clearly. He stepped closer. Duke flinched. You didn't just humiliate a man. You humiliated every uniform that ever protected this town. You took a swing at decency, at memory, at a man who gave his life piece by piece while you've done nothing but make noise and scare waitresses. The crowd murmured. Nathan lowered his voice further, now inches from Duke. And now you're going to face what cowards fear most, being seen exactly as they are, small, loud, and irrelevant. Duke's smirk vanished. At that exact moment, the giant screen from a news van parked nearby flickered on. broadcasting a looped replay of Frank getting struck, followed by the Black Hawk landing. News anchors whispered over the footage. National coverage. Inside homes across the country, the caption rolled. Decorated war hero assaulted. Son responds in military formation. Nathan turned to the crowd. This isn't about punishment. This is about memory. If we forget to honor those who stood for us, what exactly are we standing on? The silence broke. The boy who had saluted earlier stepped out, this time with his father beside him. Together, they walked up to Frank. The boy reached out, trembling, and placed a pin on Frank's lapel. His grandfather's old service badge. "He'd have wanted you to have it," the boy whispered. Frank's eyes misted for the first time all day. Then, as if a curtain lifted, dozens more stepped forward, some in uniform, some not. Some with medals, some just with stories. They lined the park, the sidewalks, the bar. Not out of guilt, but pride. And across the nation, people shared the video not because it was viral, but because something in them stirred. A reminder, a reckoning, a call. That dignity, when finally seen, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. A few days later, a letter arrived. No return address, no signature, just 6 shaky, handwritten words. "If you'll meet me, I'll listen." Frank didn't recognize the handwriting at first, but he recognized the weight behind it, and the fact that it wasn't typed, that it cost the sender something. He showed it to Nathan. "You think it's worth it?" Nathan hesitated. "If it were me, I wouldn't give him the time." Frank looked out the window. "That's the difference between me and you. You learned to fight. I learned to finish what hurt me." So they arranged it, quietly. No reporters, no uniforms. Just a courthouse-side room with scuffed tile floors and a flickering light above a steel table. Duke sat across from him, his leather vest gone, replaced with a wrinkled button-down shirt that didn't quite fit. His wrists were clenched together on the table, and his shoulders, once squared with pride, now slouched, under the weight of something new. Frank didn't say anything at first, just looked at him, measured him. Duke finally broke. "I didn't know who you were." Frank's voice was soft. "That's the problem. You didn't care." Duke swallowed hard. "My dad served too. Vietnam, came back, broken, angry, drank himself into silence. We hated that uniform. I thought it took him from us." Frank nodded slowly. It did take something from him, but what he brought back wasn't hate. It was hurt. Duke looked down. "I spent most of my life acting tough, so no one would see I was afraid." "No one's born brave," Frank said. "It's earned, moment by moment. Most days it looks like doing the right thing even when no one's watching." Duke reached into his folder and slid a piece of paper across the table. A court-ordered therapy program, volunteering hours, a written statement of apology. "I'm not asking to be forgiven," he said. "I'm just asking for a way back." Frank didn't smile, but his eyes softened. He placed a hand over the paper. "You won't earn it fast, but every day you show up, that's a day you're not hiding." Duke nodded, tears welling but unspilled. That meeting would never go viral. No cameras, no Black Hawk, no standing ovation, just 2 men, broken in different ways, trying to stand a little taller than their pasts. 6 months later, at the corner of Broad and Ellison, a bronze plaque was mounted on a stone wall beneath the American flag. "In honor of Sergeant Franklin Delaney, a quiet shield between us and chaos." Below it, etched in deeper steel, "He never asked to be seen. He simply stood." People paused now when they passed. Not all, but enough. Some left flowers on Veterans Day. Others took their kids there to tell them why the sidewalk matters. And Duke? He didn't speak much, but twice a week he drove veterans to and from the VA in a faded white van with no logos. He opened doors, carried groceries, waited outside therapy rooms. Frank sometimes saw him around town. They'd nod. Never made a show of it. Just a quiet acknowledgement. Like two soldiers from different wars walking the same path, finally heading in the same direction. Every Thursday, Frank still walked to the corner of Broad and Ellison. Same boots, same jacket, same slow, steady pace. But now, something was different. Now someone always waved first. A teenager on a skateboard would nod respectfully. A young soldier in uniform would pause to shake his hand. A father would point him out to his son, not as a legend, but as an example. Frank never asked for that. He never wanted the spotlight. But once a town sees truth, it's hard to unsee it. Even Murphy's Taproom changed. They replaced the front window that cracked from the rotor wash, but left the hairline spiderweb in the glass untouched. A reminder, the owner said, of what happens when we forget who we're really standing on. Nathan returned only once after the ceremony. Just him. No uniform. No SUV. He sat beside Frank on the same bench. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. After a while, Nathan simply said, "You changed this place." Frank looked at the boy across the street tying a small flag to his bicycle. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe they just remembered what mattered." The wind picked up through the trees, rattling branches in rhythm like distant rotors remembered not with fear, but with reverence. The world didn't suddenly fix itself. Not everyone learned. Not every veteran was honored. But the story? It stuck. Because it wasn't just a slap. It was a mirror. A mirror for every time we passed someone by without seeing, for every laugh we swallowed instead of stopping, for every time dignity sat bleeding on a bench while we scrolled past. And that story started getting shared, again and again, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true, because it reminded people of something easy to forget, that respect doesn't wear medals. It wears silence, sacrifice, and some uniforms. They never really come off. So, if you're still listening, ask yourself, if you were there that day, would you have stood still too? Or would you have been the first one to pick up the bread? If this story moved you, share it, not for clicks, not for views, but because somewhere out there, someone like Frank is sitting quietly, waiting for someone, anyone, to look up and say, "I see you." Let's be the kind of town that doesn't wait for a helicopter to do what our conscience should have done all along. Because sometimes, the quietest people carry the heaviest weight. And the smallest nod might just be the flag they've been fighting for their whole life.